Right now, Israel is in one of those moments where the headlines sound clean, but reality isn't. Because yes, people are talking about Phase B in Gaza, frameworks, mechanisms, options, but Hamas didn't disappear just because someone says the words Phase B. In the last few days, Hamas has violated the ceasefire, and when Hamas violates a ceasefire, Israel does what it has to do. It acts, fast, with precision, and with a purpose. Not because we want escalation, because we don't allow terrorists to set the rules. We've seen it on the ground. Incidents near Rafah, terror cells emerging from tunnel areas, and Israel responding with strikes on Hamas targets. Terror infrastructure, weapon-related sites, launch-related capabilities. At the same time, Rafah is reopening in a limited way, under lists, approvals, caps, screening, and international mechanisms. And here's the hard truth. An open crossing is not the same as an open reality. Because if Hamas still controls the street, it'll try to exploit every crack, every movement, the aid, the governance, and the perception. So this is the question, hanging over Phase B. Is this a real transition, or is it Hamas trying to survive by rebuilding, by hiding, by rebranding, while keeping the guns? And that brings us to the moment Israel reached just last week, because it tells you what Israel is actually trying to do in the middle of all this pressure. Israel brought home the body of the final hostage, Ran Gvili. For the first time since 2014, there are no Israeli hostages being held inside Gaza. It's an emotional sentence, but it's also a strategic one, because it shows something Hamas and the world keep underestimating. Israel doesn't leave its people behind, not the living and definitely not the fallen. And today, from here at the Israeli government press office in Jerusalem, we're going to unpack what that milestone means to Israel's leadership and why it matters right now inside this messy reality of Phase B.
Welcome to Israel Beyond the Headlines here in the Israel Government Press Office. I'm Karen Goldstein, and today I'm accompanied by two very special guests. Shosh Ben-Jerosian, spokeswoman and communication specialist for the foreign media in the Office of the Prime Minister of Israel. And from TBN Israel, I want to welcome back Mati Shoshani.
It's good to be back.
It's so great to have you back with us again. And Mati, I know you've recently come back from being in the army, so Thank you for your service. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
It's good to be back. Can I just say before we get started, the last time we did this, Karen,
Yes.
about 80% of the comments on the video, you know what they were?
I saw
Your friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Karen's friends.
Probably on Instagram and...
Yeah. They were your personal friends.
Thank God, good friends.
So good work.
They supporting. Anyway, so Israel hit an incredible milestone last week, bringing home the body of our final hostage, Ran Gvili.
Yeah.
And it's the first time since 2014 that there are no Israeli hostages left being held in Gaza, and which is such an amazing and emotional sentence to say. And Shosh, can you explain what this accomplishment means to the Prime Minister?
Yeah, so just to go off of what you just said, to be able to say for the first time since 2014, we have no more hostages left in the Gaza Strip being held by jihadi terrorists whose only goal is to annihilate the state of Israel, is an incredible achievement. And bringing home all of our hostages from before October 7th and after October 7th was the number one mission of Prime Minister Netanyahu, bringing everyone back home, either for a second chance at life for our living hostages who survived absolute hell after more than 2 years in captivity, but also for our deceased hostages, who were tragically murdered either on October 7th or while in captivity. Bringing their bodies home for a proper burial is exactly what every single person needs. But also remember, we had foreign nationals who were kidnapped on October 7th from Tanzania, from Thailand, from Nepal. And it was also our mission, the Prime Minister's mission, and the State of Israel's mission to ensure that every single person is buried the exact way they need to be brought to their respected countries and back to the state of Israel for proper burial. So this is an incredible milestone to be able to see our final hostage, Rani Gvili, who eliminated 14 terrorists on October 7th, putting his whole life in harm's way with a broken shoulder, mind you, to defend the people of Israel.
Yeah.
And he did that until his very last breath. And his family has always said Ronnie was the first one in and the last one to come home. And now Ronnie is officially buried in the state of Israel. The prime minister has been in touch with his family from the beginning. They've had a very close contact with each other. His mother actually flew with us on Wing of Zion to Florida, where they had a meeting with President Trump as well. So he's been in close contact to ensure that Ron Gvili comes home, and he did.
And why was accomplishing this so important to the Prime Minister?
This is the children of Israel, bringing home Jewish lives that were taken at the hands of terrorism. It is who we are as Jews. It is who we are as Israelis, as people. It is the code of ethics we follow, that every single life, whether you are living, whether you are deceased, is you come home, and you come home to Israel or wherever country you are from. But the Prime Minister, you have to remember, he did this despite enormous mounting pressure on him here at home, but also internationally. So many people, officials from around the world told him, don't go into Gaza City. But Gaza City was the last Hamas stronghold. And when Israel and the IDF soldiers, our brave soldiers, and thank you for your service, went into Gaza City, it put an enormous amount of pressure on Hamas militarily, and with the help from President Trump, diplomatically, it got Hamas to finally come back to the table, agree to a deal, and here we are now. And that's how we accomplish this, through incredible strength. As the Prime Minister always says, it's peace through strength, and that's how we accomplish the ceasefire deal.
Let me add something here. I know we're going to go into like the politics and the geopolitics and all that jazz. There's a moment that people at home need to connect to. And this is the heartbeat of the Israeli people as it relates to this story. The footage that came out of the Gaza Strip, when they find the body of Rani Gvili, we've spent time with his family. We've talked about this extensively. It's hard to explain this. Multitudes of soldiers crying together in the excitement of the moment. Moved to tears by the fact that we brought the last hostage back. I don't think anyone, possibly including people in the government, imagined it would be possible to bring the last one back. And what we had to do to get Gvili back to the country is I don't know of any other country that would do this. We literally dug up an entire cemetery and went through. The numbers are mind-blowing. I think it was over 700 bodies, and on body number 251, they identified the teeth of Rani Gvili, a man who, it wasn't an accident that he was left in Hamas captivity. It's because he was a symbol of heroism. He was a symbol of sacrifice. He was a symbol of everything Hamas is against in Israeli society and everything we in Israeli society stand for. That's why it was important to get him back. We met with his family just a short time ago. Again, very, very strong people and a very unique individual. I think for us as Israeli people, every one of these moments with the hostages are these moments of unity and collective direction and collective strength. And that moment, you have that, then you have, our chief of staff with the soldiers singing our national anthem as they're bringing him back into Israel. That's the kind of moment where we feel proud as Israelis. And, all the politics and all the geopolitics and all the diplomacy, forget that for a second. This is the kind of things that we really stand for. We care about the living, we care about our own, we care about the families in this country. And the fact that we did this as a nation, I as someone who both wears a uniform and, let's call it, journalism hat, I feel very proud to be an Israeli in those kind of moments.
Well, it brings, just you explaining that, those videos that came out the day Ron's body was uncovered in that cemetery, seeing the operation, right? The IDF released incredible video of the operation starting at night when it was dark, to, these females working to identify his remains, and then our soldiers all gathering around, like you said.
Yeah.
It gives you chills because this is who we are. And every single moment where we have been able to either rescue a hostage, bring a hostage home, or their remains, or they were released in this deal and their remains came back. It was such a moment for us as the Jewish nation, with our souls feeling like there's a little bit of weight lifted off of us because we care about every single person. That's who we are. And that's what the Prime Minister also stands for, of course, is bringing home the children of Israel and also honoring our incredible soldiers who have made every single step of this happen for us to bring home all of our people who were in captivity, and every single one of them that put their life on the line, whether in some of those rescue operations that were successful, which are just absolutely heroic stories when you hear the details, but also they were a part of getting us here, and we cannot forget that, and the hostage families don't forget that as well.
I want to tell just one more story before we really dive into what people I think are expecting, which is the politics and all that stuff. This last weekend, one of the main newspapers in Israel featured a 3-generation family that was all taken into captivity by Hamas. We interviewed the father, Tal Shoham, who spent 505 days in Hamas captivity. And people keep asking this question of why is Israel still in the Gaza Strip? Why are we still fighting in the Gaza Strip? Why are we occupying, quote unquote, 50% of the Gaza Strip? And the answer is very, very simple. Because the people we're fighting against are the kind of people that kidnap a grandmother, her daughter, their grandkids, and all of them, separate them inside of the Gaza Strip and hide them in inhumane conditions until they're rescued or forced to be released. That's the kind of enemy we're fighting. Now, we're not there because we want to, and we're not holding on to land in the Gaza Strip to play a political game against them. This is an organization who's diametrically opposed to our way of life. Not just Israel, also the U.S., also anyone who holds Western values or Judeo-Christian values. That's why we're still there. That's why we're talking about Phase B today, which is these are the people we're facing. People who will imprison and kidnap a grandmother, a woman over 70, and they've killed people, elderly individuals, children, babies. These are the kind of people we're fighting. And there is no more just thing to do than to prevent them from once again being on the borders of Israel and harming the population of Israel. I mean, there is nothing more just to do. And people like throwing around these words, international law, blah, 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 blah. They know nothing about it. International law is all about self-defense. It's all about protecting your own. And that's exactly what we're doing right now.
And I wanted to add about what you said before about how the international pressure when they told the RDF not to go into Gaza City. I think it was when they saved the 4 hostages, Noah Gamani and the 3 other hostages. I think Kamala Harris told that week the RDF not to go into Rafah, and that week they found the 4 hostages alive, which was a huge miracle, and it was really amazing, and it just shows how important it was that we fought to bring our hostages home, and we continue to fight to defend ourselves.
And that brings really the big question, which is how do we enter into Phase B and get rid of Hamas? Because everyone around the world is waiting for this moment. Here we are. There's been this waiting period, intermediate period, again and again and again, waiting for someone to replace Hamas. And my guess is a lot of people around the world are saying, well, okay, just get on with it. Get on with life. Get on with the Gaza Strip. Get on, with Hamas. And we can't. There is no way to move forward until Hamas is fully removed. They're a terrorist organization. Their only method of operation and their only DNA is a DNA of destruction and death. They don't know how to do anything else. There is no scenario where they say, this thing didn't really work out with the whole death and destruction. Let's go back to building schools and planting, flower gardens. They don't do that. What they're about is death and destruction. So we have to remove them. We have to find a situation, and I'm happy we have someone from the Prime Minister's office here. That's why the Israeli government, together with the U.S., is insisting on this equation, which is get rid of Hamas and rebuild the Gaza Strip. Get rid of Hamas, rebuild the Gaza Strip. The two can't happen independently. They both have to happen at the same time, which is what we're working on.
You also have to remember that the minute you get rid of Hamas is also the minute that the Palestinian people can have a better future.
Absolutely.
Remember, they've been dragged into this. Hamas has held them captive, as many people have said around the world. Hamas uses them as human shields, as we've seen Hamas operating inside of their schools, inside of hospitals, having command centers underneath these humanitarian zones. And this is who Hamas is. And we'll get into more of that once we talk about this.
By the way, since we're talking about Rani Gvili, and we led with that story, the last he was seen was being carried on the back of a motorcycle into Shifa Hospital. And, all the Palestinians, they love, and the pro-Palestinians, they're actually just the anti-Semites and anti-Israel people, they love saying, oh, Israel bombed the hospitals, Israel bombed the hospitals. What the Hamas did was they hid Israeli hostages inside their hospitals, and they hid sometimes thousands of Hamas terrorists inside their hospitals. We like forgetting that, and people, oh, let's move on. You bombed the hospitals. No, we didn't. We were trying to get our hostages back. They were hiding terrorists and weapons inside the hospitals. Labyrinths of caves and tunnel systems under the hospitals. That's what we've been dealing with. And again, we just remember the today and the present. This is the history that led to that moment. And I think it's a miracle that we got the last hostage back.
It's really
it says so much about who we are as a people.
Absolutely. And the dedication and the commitment, a commitment that was made at the beginning of this war, firmly, even when the senior officials doubted that the prime minister could do it, that the government could do it, that the IDF could accomplish this mission. We did it. We really did it. And Ron Gvili had the proper Jewish burial his family has been seeking since they knew he was murdered on that horrific day.
How difficult was it to bring all the hostages home?
It's a good question, because you have to remember we're dealing with a terror organization. And when you negotiate with a terror organization whose only goal is to annihilate the Jewish people and the state of Israel, you know what they really want. And Hamas prolonged talks to get our hostages out. They prolonged it and they hoped that they would get leverage, but they couldn't at the end of the day. It's with the, like I said before, the strength and the power of Prime Minister Netanyahu militarily and the diplomatic pressure from President Trump. This is where we are today. But also, we mentioned the 2 soldiers that the Prime Minister and our soldiers were able to get out in operations inside of Gaza from 2014. Our own Shaul and Hadar Golden, getting their bodies out was so critical. But when you're dealing with a terrorist organization who specifically lies over and over again in a ceasefire like this one, it's really complicated and it's difficult. Remember, Hamas committed to a ceasefire that we're currently in at the beginning. They said that they would release all of our hostages within 72 hours. It took about 4.5 months to get all of our hostages back home for a proper burial. We know that all of our living hostages were released on October 13th, which is a day many of us will never forget.
Yeah.
But now we're 1 week later, or about a week and a half later, and Ron Gvili just came home now through our strength of Israel. Hamas clearly knew where their body was. And not only that, the ceasefire and all of this was difficult dealing with Hamas, but Hamas was perpetuating lies to the media over and over and over again.
Listen, the only reason they're doing that is because it works. It works because there's people around the world that listen to those lies, and they know them to be a lie or a half-truth, and it just clicks with something inside their mind that connects to that anti-Semitism or anti-Israel or anti-whatever it is agenda that they have in their mind, and they run with it. And there's a whole media world out there that insists on spreading those half-truths, that insists on talking about these kind of things. I mean, even with Ran Gvili, there were outlets, let's not name them right now, there were several outlets in the West that talked about Hamas returning the last hostage, and not the fact that Israel had to go against, sort of against them to take control of a piece of land that wasn't under control, our control, and bring him back. Again, it makes you understand that the people who are willing to fight and stand up for what's true around the world are far and few, and there are many who are wanting to sort of eat up the Hamas lies, because it wouldn't work for Hamas if people oppose them. It wouldn't work for Hamas if people fact-check them. It wouldn't work for Hamas if someone said, well, you claim everyone that was killed in the Gaza Strip is a kid and that Israel is targeting children intentionally, but all of them are men of a fighting age. Doesn't that contradict each other? No one bothers to say that, even though the information's out there. It's not like the Israeli government hasn't been trying to spread the information. There are a lot of people that don't want to hear the truth about it.
And I've said in our briefings that we did during the ceasefire, when we didn't have all of our hostages back, Israel knows that Hamas knows where our hostages are. I specifically remember doing an interview, and the anchor of the show said, well, Hamas says they can't find any more bodies. And I said to her, would you rather listen to a terror organization or a country that's fighting for civilization right now?
Yeah.
Getting back our hostages, Hamas knows exactly where all of them are located, and we're going to get all of them out. And for the news to continuously perpetuate these lies with headlines, it is, we're in a different time. with media and with news, and accountability is really important. But to your point, Mati, it's incredibly important for us to continue to share the truth, stand up to the facts, and have these conversations, to remember the truth, to have the documentation that we stood up against the lies that were perpetuated by Hamas and by people who echoed them.
Yeah, and I'd say the important thing is the consistency. And this is what a lot of people miss. This generation is dominated by short media and short-term memory. So if it wasn't in your feed in the last 24 hours, it's almost as if it didn't happen in the past. So they look at the situation in Gaza and they say, well, what about the suffering in Gaza? Look what Israel did to the houses of the Gazans. You ruined all the houses. How could you do such a terrible thing? It's like, and then they forget that almost all those houses were or booby trapped or had terrorists actively engaged or hiding inside those houses. And they forget that Hamas instigated the October attacks. It's as if it didn't happen. So the memory is very, very short. We have to give people the perspective. And it's not enough just to watch the news cycle. They have to have a perspective that's based on values and based on an understanding of what actually happens here in this part of the world. We've seen with our audience, a huge number of the people, they've been waiting for someone to talk about this. They want people to connect the dots for them because the media is just dominated with these lies. And the lies are usually half-truths. That's the problem with them. Because the statement might be, it's winter, IDF is in Gaza, and the children of Gaza are suffering, or some kind of mix of that information. Those are all true statements. But there's a backstory to all of that. And no one wants to talk about the backstory. Mm-hmm. No, they're there because Hamas caused destruction, because Hamas attacked, because Hamas has been doing this for, a lifetime at this point, since we withdrew unilaterally from the Gaza Strip. I was there as a commander in the army, pulling out the Jewish civilians of the Gaza Strip so Hamas could, well, it wasn't Hamas at the time, it was the PLO, so they could control themselves, and they decided, we don't want to do that. We want to attack Israel. And then they did it again and again and again and again, all the way till October 7th, 2023. And I think it's important that we're doing this and talking about the context of this conversation. And I want to say this to people watching at home. They hear the snippet of the news. You have to go back farther than that. You have to understand what's been happening, what the history is, and then it makes sense.
And it took 4 months since the ceasefire to bring back everyone, as you said.
Yeah.
And has Hamas upheld to the ceasefire?
Hamas has violated the ceasefire since day one. Remember, They signed on to a deal that they would return all of our hostages within 72 hours. That's the first violation. They've continued to attack our soldiers who are holding that yellow line inside of the Gaza Strip, controlling 53% of the enclave. And not only that, just this week, the IDF released another violation of Hamas storing 110 mortar shells, rockets, and other weapons inside of UNRWA humanitarian aid bags. Over and over and over again, Hamas has violated the agreement. Hamas has lied about the agreement, saying they can't find our bodies. But here we are, we're at a good point where our hostages are home. Hamas needs to disarm. That is a requirement, and it's a requirement that they signed on to as part of this deal. And Gaza will also be demilitarized as part of this. But Hamas has violated it. The IDF has done an incredible job of pointing that out over and over again as terrorists have approached the yellow line of where our soldiers are and attacked them. And this has happened on a weekly basis with Hamas.
But it's worse. And this is what I think people miss at home. When we say Hamas attacks IDF soldiers, I think people imagine that we're fighting our peers. So it's adult males probably, in a uniform with a gun. That's not what they're doing. They send children to test the IDF. And they send children to retrieve weapons that are nearby IDF positions, forcing the soldiers to have to respond to that. Because if they don't, that same quote-unquote child is now an armed terrorist. And it's this very, very twisted use and abuse of life that they do that people outside of Israel don't know and haven't seen the images of. All they see is the aftermath. Well, why are you firing on this poor underage child? Well, he was holding an RPG, or he was going to plant an IED on a vehicle. He was sent by Hamas, who paid his family to do this. And this is really the mentality that I think people miss. And we're talking about, going into this phase B of the Gaza Strip. Hamas has to be removed. I love what you're saying, Shosh. Hamas lies. That's all they ever do. they've never done anything but lie. They've never done anything but deceive. I mean, their whole thing, people forget of generations of the Pallywood, industry of creating fake images of suffering and taking things out of context, et cetera, recycling footage from other civil wars as incidents that took place in the Gaza Strip. I mean, this is what they've always done. These are the people we're fighting against. The people of Gaza deserve better than that, and the Middle East deserves better than that. And my hope is that people don't get tired, that the Trump White House doesn't get tired and move on to the next topic, be it China or Russia or whatever it is. And we stick to this until we completely replace the Hamas regime from the Gaza Strip. I mean, they've brought nothing but death and destruction to those people. They need to be removed.
And on that point, I also want to add, under the ceasefire, specifically at the beginning, there were horrific images coming out of Gaza of Gazans being tortured to death, executed with their hands behind their back, blindfolded, being shot in the back of the head, public executions. And it was horrifying to see, but this is the nature of who Hamas is. They don't care about their own people. What do they care about? Destroying the Jewish state. And that's something that needs to be worn on the sleeves by every single reporter when they report on this conflict. We're talking about Hamas. Okay, Hamas wants to destroy the Jewish people and the Jewish state. That's who they are. That's what they're after. That's what they have been after. The prime minister has made that very, very clear. They're a genocidal terror organization who brought nothing but hell to their own people and caused absolute destruction and havoc to our people on our southern border.
Can I make an offhand comment? We're sitting here at La'am, which is the government press office. And I think people have this very twisted perception that the media is all in the area of like the gray area. And the truth, most people hold on to the truth and they just look at it from a different angle. That's not the case as it relates to what's happening in the Gaza Strip and the way other countries are covering what's happening in this part of the world. The European Union, just last week, I guess, finally remembered that the IRGC is a terrorist organization, right? It was last week that they did it. I mean, it took them literally 47 years to realize that a terrorist organization is a terrorist organization. If we expect them to give fair coverage or a fair approach to what's happening in the Gaza Strip, we're not there. You look at the likes, we started talking about this before we were rolling, the likes of UNRWA, the UN agency, Relief Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees. They are unbelievably successful at doing one single thing, which is perpetuating the Palestinians as victims, not rebuilding them. Every other agency that existed previously, those people are 3 generations into not being a victim and not being a refugee. The only ones in the world that are still refugees today are the Palestinians. But they go further than that. They train people to be terrorists. They've been infiltrated by Hamas and other terrorist organizations. They teach the kids to be terrorists. They pay them to be terrorists. They indoctrinate them to exactly that. And then we look at surprise, oh, look, we found missiles in their schools. I mean, they've never done anything else. This is what they do consistently. And
every hostage that comes back from captivity has said that the terrorists told them that they will do it over and over.
Yeah. So this woman it was the 3 generations of Tal Shoam's family that were held by Hamas. The grandmother, and I think this would surprise a lot of people, the communities that were most severely hurt outside of the Gaza Strip, they were leftist communities. They were communities, Be'eri, the kibbutz that this family was taken from, they continued paying Gazan employees well after Israel closed the borders because they felt so bad for them for losing their job opportunities. Those same people and their family members are the ones who came to loot and kill in that same kibbutz. And she comes out and they said, well, did it change your perception? She said, I don't know what we can do with these people. All they ever talk about is the fact that they want to kill us and destroy us as a people. They don't have anything else literally, that's all they ever talk about related to us. They're sort of waiting for us to leave the country, waiting for us to flee, waiting for us to give up. And she said, I myself, a day before October 7th, hosted a solidarity event for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I mean, this is how much the world we live in is twisted and bizarre. A new year has begun, and with it comes a renewed opportunity to make a real difference in the land of Israel.
The Rebuild Israel campaign is back, and this Tu B'Shvat, we are planting something powerful, an apple orchard in Israel's north, near the border with Lebanon.
But this isn't just about trees. It's about healing a wounded land.
Every tree planted brings new strength. It creates jobs, restores agriculture, and sends a clear message: the people of Israel are not giving up. Your support makes this possible. Your donations go directly to planting these trees.
Each tree is a symbol of hope, a symbol of faith, and your part in this mission leaves a lasting impact for generations to come. Plant a tree, restore the land, and build the future.
Go to www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael and be part of this mission, one tree at a time.
And for years, there's been a cycle of victimhood in Gaza perpetuated by the United Nations, specifically UNRWA. So, Shosh, how does the Israeli government perceive UNRWA?
And exactly. And to your point, Mati, it is a topic that needs to be discussed. It is so scathing. And that's because Hamas and other terror factions inside of the Gaza Strip have infiltrated completely inside of UNRWA, which is a so-called humanitarian organization. So the question now goes to, why does a humanitarian organization have 12% of their employees working for Hamas or other terrorist organizations? That's 1,400 employees that are employed by UNRWA. These are math teachers, these are social workers, these are gym teachers, science teachers, these are principals as well. So this is a serious problem beyond, because of the education that you mentioned that happens in UNRWA schools. There were about 12 or more than 12 UNRWA employees that invaded our southern border on October 7th. I want to talk about one specific story. We had a hostage in captivity. His name was Yonatan Samarano. Yonatan Samarano was murdered on Kibbutz Be'eri. He was fleeing from the Nova Festival, and his body was laying there outside the gates of the community, and completely limp, lifeless body. There was a car that pulls up, and two men get out of the car, and one of them was an UNRWA social worker. They lift his lifeless, limp body into the back of a vehicle and kidnap it into Gaza. This is all captured on video. It has been released by the Foreign Ministry. It's been released by the IDF, in addition to our office. This is UNRWA. That is a social worker who kidnapped a dead body of one of our hostages into Gaza. Yonatan Samarano's body was finally uncovered. It was discovered by our forces, our IDF soldiers, back in June. But who takes a body? You're a social worker? It is so far beyond discussed, but this is what this organization is. And this infiltration is so severe. To have the headquarters of UNRWA standing in Gaza, and you have underneath it a Hamas command center. This is real. This is real. And like I said, 12% of your employees. We can go on and on about the people that is documented by the Israeli government that infiltrated our southern border to murder, to attack our people on that horrific day. And it's a serious problem. And remember, every single terrorist who is part of Hamas, who was also educated at an UNRWA school in Gaza. These are all UNRWA graduates, these terrorists that exist inside PIJ, Hamas, and other terror factions inside of the Gaza Strip.
I love what you said. And I think there's this misconception where people love using the word innocent bystanders or non-combatants in Gaza. And I want to talk about the numbers for a second. You said 12% of UNRWA. My guess is, the entire organization is corrupt and broken when you think about it. So you take that and you think about, let's say there were 5,000 people that came in from Gaza on the 7th of October to Israel. Some of them were terrorists and a bunch of them were looters. They had family members that knew about this. And they had neighbors that knew about this taking place. And they had people in their mosque that saw them prepping their weapons to invade into Israel. And none of those people thought to themselves, maybe I should tip someone off in Israel so they can prevent the slaughter that's about to happen. Then they brought several hundred hostages back into the Gaza Strip. And no one in Gaza thought to say, wait a minute, that's an elderly woman. That is a toddler. That is a child. That is a young woman. Maybe we should help these people be rescued from the captivity of these terrorists. And when you look at that, you really understand the system. It's a system of moral corruption that is funded by the international community. This isn't just Hamas doing its own thing. They're funded by their overlords, a country we can't name right now. They're funded by European countries. They're funded by the American government to a certain degree, less in recent years under the Trump administration. And they're all funding this system that breeds hatred and violence, where an entire population is sure the solution to all their problems is hurting Jewish people. And when you look at that, you say, okay, this system's broken. We need to get rid of the Hamas as an organization that governs and controls the Gaza Strip. We need to re-educate these people. It's going to take probably a long time. We need to get rid of UNRWA. Then when you put that into context, you get why the Trump White House and the Israeli government are so adamant against what this organization does, removing them from Israel entirely and their operations and setting something else up in its place, which brings us to phase B of the Gaza Strip, which is, we're supposed to have the ISF, the International Stabilization Force. We're supposed to have these peace committees and entities. It's all because of how broken the current system is. It didn't start on October 7th. October 7th was a culmination of a whole system that built up towards that moment.
And what do people not understand about UNRWA?
They don't realize how embedded this quote-unquote humanitarian organization is with terrorists. And I want to point you to all of the evidence that the Israeli government has put out, the IDF has put out, of UNRWA buildings being used as launching pads to launch rockets at the state of Israel. We heard stories of our hostages being held in camps where UNRWA locations, UNRWA teachers, some of our hostages were held by. How about the humanitarian aid bags that were used by Hamas and other terrorist organizations to smuggle weapons to and from locations, schools where weapon caches were located? How is it that all of these Hamas ways of using their terrorism, how is it that UNRWA is tied into nearly almost so many moments the IDF has caught? It can't be a coincidence. It's just that Hamas is embedded into this organization, and it is a serious problem. And the people of Gaza have suffered at the hands of this. Remember, like I said, every single terrorist was educated at an UNRWA school. And these people crossed our border. They sexually assaulted our people, our hostages, and it is absolutely horrific the conditions our hostages had to endure. And this is what we're dealing with.
And why does Hamas and PRJ use UNRWA infrastructure for their terror purposes?
I think it's a good question, and I think it's the question we all want answered. Why is it that they're so embedded in Hamas? How is this even possible?
Can I play devil's advocate for a second? What people outside of this conversation would say is, no, you don't get it. They're the victims. UNRWA was just afraid of Hamas, so they wanted to help the people of Gaza, even though they were pressuring them and scaring them. And to that I want to say, go check what happens in other countries around the world when terrorist organizations open fire on them. What do? They don't say, okay, infiltrate our organization and you control the curriculum in our schools, et cetera, and take over the governance of it. They pack up their bags, they get on a plane, and they leave the country. It happened during this last war in Yemen. But yet somehow UNRWA in this situation, well, it seems like, even if they're against it, it seems like they just reconciled with the fact that Hamas gets to dictate the shots and the way they operate, and they're okay with it for some reason.
How has UNRWA failed the Palestinian people?
Yeah, it goes back to our whole point of being embedded into schools where these children have curriculums where they're taught to hate Jews, to hate the state of Israel, to believe the state of Israel is an enemy. Meanwhile, Israel is the country in the Middle East that is defending democracy. It is defending our Western belief system. And the United States knows that. We're on the first line of defense. And that's what Israel stands for. And the problem is the education in schools, but also the fact that Hamas is so embedded, smuggling weapons, using UNRWA facilities, ambulances, schools, hospitals, the list goes on and on and on. So when you have all of these facilities that are UNRWA facilities being used, what does that mean? It means that these Palestinians are being used as human shields. It is as simple. It is as clear as that, clear as day. And the IDF has mounting evidence to prove every single case of this.
Can I say something else to say? Even outside of, let's say we ended this conversation or started it before everything that happened on October 7th, before everything that was discovered about UNRWA, just for the fact that they're so ineffective in what they're doing, they should be shut down as an organization. And I'll explain. They were started as a relief organization that was supposed to temporarily help the Palestinian refugees post the 1948-49 war, the War of Independence in Israel, or sorry, 47-48. Depends when you exactly start counting. And then also the people that were added to that list in the Six-Day War in 1967. They were supposed to help them stop being refugees and to recover them financially. The Palestinian people, I don't know how much people are aware of this, they're the single largest recipient of aid in human history as a people group. I mean, they've received per capita, and I ran the numbers, this is in a previous life, let's say 11 or 12 years ago. I want to say it was like 30 to 35 times more than what the Japanese and the Germans received in the Marshall Plan post-World War II, which rebuilt their economies from scratch from the destruction of World War II, made Germany, Western Germany, and Japan the powerhouses of manufacturing that they are today. With that money, the Palestinians have received at this point dozens of times more per person than that. And what they have to show in return for that is the aid organizations got rich, the corrupt leaders got rich, they took the money to Swiss banks, to other banks outside of the world. They sent their kids to colleges in other languages in other countries. They stole the money and they built terrorism infrastructure. And they have nothing to show for it. And even for that reason alone...
The only thing they have to show are terror tunnels.
Exactly.
That spanned hundreds of kilometers underneath the civilian population.
Yeah. So, I mean, the outcome is very clear. An organization who shows that kind of results time after time, year after year, decade after decade, they first, I just say they're negligent. Then once you realize it's both corruption and malice at the same time, they belong in prison. This isn't just about disbanding them. I mean, it's a level of moral corruption and abandon that exists at the leadership of that organization, where they should be publicly tried for what they've done here. I mean, they've kept these people in a state of victimhood for so long and allowed terrorist organizations time and time again to take over it and sort of usurp what should have been the organization. They should be punished for it. And it should be done in a public way so people understand what was done to the Palestinian people. It's evil on a multi-generational level at this point.
Their hate for us is stronger than, their love for their own people and helping their own people.
Yeah, it's spiritual at this point. You can't look at it from a logical perspective and say, well, this makes sense. There's political, no, why would he do this? Why would he be so hateful? Why would he do it for so many years and only bring destruction time and time again? There is no explanation.
So Shosh, before you leave, is there any message that you want to leave us with?
That's a good question. Israel will do anything and will do everything to protect our people, our security forces, our soldiers, and all of our borders from the north to the south, the east and the west. This is what Israel does. And the Prime Minister will ensure that. He will ensure that there are no threats on any of our borders. Over the last 2 years, the Prime Minister has said we will change the face of the Middle East. And we have. We have Hamas, who is the weakest point they've ever been at. We have Hezbollah, who is on their knees right now because of what Israel has done, in addition to the Houthis as well. And also, of course, the 12-day war, cutting off this nuclear program that Iran had. The successes that we have been able to achieve in the last 2 years are enormous. They're historic. And now, finally, bringing home our last hostage. It is a full circle moment, and there is still work that needs to be done to ensure that Hamas is no longer inside of the Gaza Strip. They're disarmed. The Gaza Strip is demilitarized, and also that the people of Gaza are de-radicalized. That's another step the Prime Minister also says. So the state of Israel is protected by the best people there are, by our heroic soldiers. Like I said, thank you for everything that you do, and all of the people that put their life on the line. This is why we have a Jewish state and why we stand strong every single day.
Shosh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Powerful words.
And thank you for the incredible work you do for the people of Israel.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Since late December 2025, mass protests have swept across Iran, triggered by deep economic distress, political dissatisfaction, and broader calls for change. What began as demonstrations against inflation and living conditions quickly grew into the largest nationwide unrest since the 1979 revolution. The regime's response has been extraordinarily violent and deadly. Security forces opened fire on demonstrators, leading to tens of thousands of casualties and widespread arrests. Independent estimates suggest over 30,000 killed and hundreds of thousands wounded. The government tightly controls information, so the precise figures are contested. So, Matty, does this internal situation in Iran impact the decisions of Israel and the US against the terror regime?
Yeah, I mean, I think before we even dive into the details, I just want to say that I think me and all our viewers and everyone with a heart around the world, we just hope the Iranians get something better than the Ayatollah regime. I think that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on like the list is get rid of that radical evil regime that has been controlling them for 47 years.
Definitely.
And I don't want to say everything is better than that because we don't know what we don't know, but it seems like almost anything is better than that. And yes, I mean, I look at this from a positive perspective. If the Ayatollah regime is removed and Iran has a more moderate government, they don't even have to be democratic, but it would be nice if they were. Even if they just have a more moderate government and they stop exporting terrorism and they stop spending tens of billions of dollars a year on trying to harm Israel and Western life, that transforms the world. I mean, I'm not exaggerating.
It's a revolution.
They're a destabilizing force that exports terrorism on multiple fronts. They're behind the Houthis, at least in a certain way. They're behind Hezbollah. They're behind Hamas. They're behind, countless terrorist attacks that have taken place not just in Israel, not just in the Middle East, but also against American targets and American civilians, going back into the 80s. I mean, they're a very, very, very problematic. Early 80s. Very, very problematic regime. Very violent regime. Very much intent and focused on, one, bleeding their country dry, which they've been doing. Secondly, bringing destruction to other countries in the world. And now that they've been found to be the thieves that they are, a kleptocracy that's been stealing from its people for 47 years and exporting terrorism, and then shown to also be not good at doing that, to being a failure at exporting terrorism to a certain degree. Their ring of fire, as they like to call it, around Israel, that they've spent, people forget the numbers, they spend more than Israel's defense budget every year for decades on spreading terrorism around Israel. And then in a matter of 6 months, Israel removed Hamas as a threat, Hezbollah as a threat, which was the biggest and best funded terrorist organization in the world. Not that that's a competition anyone should be in, but it is.
We'll give it to them.
Yeah. And the Houthi threat to a great degree, and their ballistic missile threat to a degree, and their ability to harm Israelis and Jewish targets outside of Israel, those have all been diminished to almost non-existing. Then, in Operation Midnight Hammer, as the Americans call it, or Rising Lion, which is a much better name, which Israel called it back in June, Israel in a quick move, later aided by the Americans, which we need to remember. It took them a week and a half to get involved in the attack. We removed most of their nuclear facilities. We removed all their aerial defenses and in the significant ones. We showed them to be a sham of a government and of a military organization. And then they started killing their own people again. That brought us to today. You combine all of those effects and you say, how could anyone in the world look at this and not say, be gone, evil Ayatollahs? Like that should be so obvious to anyone around the world. My heart goes out to the people of Iran. Outside of the fact that they're an existential threat to us in Israel, my heart goes out to those people. I hope they have a better future. They're good people.
All of us do, yeah.
They're good people with an amazing, rich history. They deserve better than this. They themselves say they've been kidnapped, hijacked as a country, as a nation, first by the Ayatollahs, but before that also by Islam. They have a lot more than just Islam going for them as a people. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said this multiple times. The Trump White House has said this. The Iranian people are not our enemies. It's the Ayatollah regime that is our enemy. We need to remove them. And then we get to what's happening actually now, today.
So back to what you said before about the revolution of how weakening the regime can also weaken Iran's proxies, including Hamas and Hezbollah. So do you think that if the Iranian people manage to destroy the regime, that it can potentially change Hamas, Hezbollah, all of its proxies?
There's no doubt about it. And before we get to what the Iranians do as far as exporting and terrorism and proxy warfare, I just want to say this. What they've done to their people is atrocious. They've opened fire. They've been using snipers to take headshots against their own civilians repeatedly. The images, if you look at the uncensored part of the internet, It is the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night, what they've been doing to their own people. The death toll is in the tens of thousands at this point. Depends who you're asking. Even if you ask their own regime, it's in the tens of thousands. The number of arrests are in the tens of thousands. The number of people that have been beaten and targeted by the government is in the hundreds of thousands, possibly at this point. This isn't a legitimate regime. This is a murderous organization that is killing its own people and trying to kill other people. Those are the facts. Then you ask the question of exporting terrorism. So here's what we know. And I've experienced this both in uniform and also in my professional life. Behind almost every weapon that you find in Judea and Samaria, in the Gaza Strip, and in the hands of almost every terrorist in the Middle East is Iranian money, Iranian influence, and Iranian indoctrination to violence. Behind the car bombs in Judea and Samaria are Iranian telegram groups that teach young Palestinian men and women how to create bombs out of fertilizer and how to rig cars to explode inside civilian populations. They send cryptocurrency to pay Palestinians, and they try to do the same thing with much limited success to the Jewish population to try to get people to harm civilians within Israel. They've done the same in Lebanon through Hezbollah, and the list goes on and on and on. So if you cut the money, I mean, it's obvious. The drone,
behind it all.
yeah, the drone shipments of weapons into the Gaza Strip, right now, today, as we're sitting here, they stop because no one's funding them anymore. The support of the Houthis and their murderous sort of reign in Yemen, that stops, or it's at least slowed down dramatically because they're cut from their financial ties. The illegal cash that goes into what's been happening in Venezuela, in the narco-terrorism into North America, that stops to a certain degree. The illegal oil that's sold and helps fund the Iranian terrorism machine, that stops too. They can become a legitimate country. They no longer need to support terrorism to sort of create the moral justification of them as a regime, which is exactly what it is. And we can live in a much better world. So on every possible level, when you look at this, remove the Ayatollahs, easy win for the Iranian people, obvious win for the world, and the world becomes a better place. I mean, again, we could go on and on with this, but it's so obvious that this needs to happen. It's just a question of how, because they've shown that they're willing to do almost anything to stop their population from rising up against them. I think the numbers are, you might know it better than me, 15.
What I saw was 30,000, but nothing's 100%. And as I said before, they control what's put out, and I've seen they've put internet blocks.
Absolutely.
So they control it. So we don't know for sure, but it's
a lot.
It's terrible, and I've seen even people saying that not only protesters were getting attacked, but people in their homes. They were breaking into people's homes and killing and arresting, and you can't even imagine. But what I wanted to say before was, it's interesting because the ideology will still be there with Hamas and Hezbollah, and if you take the money away, which funds everything with the rockets or their whole terror regime. It's interesting if the ideology can even be eliminated if the money's not there. But
I think that's a very, very profound question. And I'd say this. I don't underestimate our enemies and their devotion to their hateful doctrine, if I'm being fair. Now, they really, really, really hate us. It's not about money, and it's not about just the power. They honest to God, hate us. And it's part of their belief system. But, and there's a big but coming, someone paid to indoctrinate them. They didn't just wake up one morning and say, you know what? I think the best thing to do right now is to find an enemy that is a couple thousand kilometers away from where we live. Let's think of someone. What about those Jews? We haven't hated on them in a while. So, it's someone paid to indoctrinate. By the way, it's not just the Iranians. Also, the Qataris have done the same thing through Al Jazeera and the likes of that, and other, many. We could go on and on that topic, but they hate, and someone's indoctrinated them. And I say this to your question: if someone thinks that the moment you cut the funding, the people of Gaza and by extension other terrorist organizations and the population that support them, they suddenly wake up, from this dream, and the evil goes away like in a Disney film, that's not what's going to happen. You need to reverse the process. If they've spent 50 years on bringing destruction and death and raising up a people group who are hateful and violent and, and just, they're just evil in a deep-rooted way, the only way to fix that is to reverse the process. is to build up and educate, to love, and to care, and to value human life, and to build something instead of just destroy. Destroying is easy. Blowing up things is easy. That's the easy part. Building up a population is the hard part. Teaching love and patience and respect to your people, that's the hard part. Look at what they've done to their own countries. I mean, it's not just Israel that they've tried to target. They've ruined the economy of the Iranian people. They took a highly educated population. They brought them down in a way that set them back 150 years. They've ruined the economy. They've ruined the infrastructure. They've ruined even the nature itself is showing the signs of the abuse of the Ayatollah regime. And the same applies to every country that they've touched. I mean, it's not just them. It's more complicated. But Lebanon is the victim of radical Islam. Remove that scorn. Remove the horrible effect of that, and you can rebuild a nation. But, and I think this is where we go with the Trump White House, the process of rebuilding is expensive and it takes a long time. And we need to see countries, Israel's part of that, but again, we're just a small country. You need the international community to come together and say, let's rebuild these countries in the right way that needs to be done. Let's spend time educating. Let's spend time changing the national narrative. And then and only then can you really expect something different. That's the truth.
And do you think that there are Iranians that are against the regime, but they agree with the regime in presenting Israel as the enemy?
No.
No?
No. You know
Comes
what?
hand in hand?
No, I mean, so let's break down this. The Iranian regime, I think the numbers estimate, let's say it's around 15 to 20% of the population is employed or tied to the regime one way or another. IRGC, they control most of the economy. So it's the companies and the businesses and the professionals that benefit from it directly. They want to hold on to that power. But there's a whole lot of people in that population that are not radical Islamic in their practice or in their belief system. In fact, one might say that it's the opposite. They've been so disillusioned by the version of Islam that was presented to them by the Ayatollah regime that they're against it. And if you go into our comment section, anytime you mention Iran, you're going to see a whole lot of comments coming out of Iran and the Iranian expat population around the world, which is a massive population, that all says, we're not like them. We love Israel. We care about Israel. I have Iranian friends who love Israel. I have Iranian friends who live in Israel, by the way, too. You're not going to find one who says, I hate Israel, because it's not part of their identity. In fact, if you go back in history, just a few years before I was born, just to date myself, Iran was a friend of Israel. You go back a couple millennia before that, and Iran was a biblical level friend of the Jewish people. They're the ones that are behind what we call the Second Temple in Jerusalem. They're the ones behind Ezra and Nehemiah returning to this land and rebuilding it. They've been our friends for a really long time. And if you change that regime, they can go back to being that again.
So do you have a message for the people of Iran?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I'm going to tell them we absolutely love them and we care for them. I'm praying for them. My family prays for them. People in Israel are praying for their peace and their redemption from the evil regime of the Ayatollahs. Not a day, any day would be too late. We absolutely care for them. We absolutely believe that they deserve a better future, and that we, the Jewish people, think that about them. Many around the world think about them, and definitely God and God's people think that about them. They deserve better than that.
So thank you so much for coming, Matty.
Thank you for having
And
us.
It was an honor to have you today. And
Well, it's
thank
our
you
honor.
all for watching.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.